Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, February 14th, 2018 actually started out as a rather nice day. It was Valentine's Day. And the weather? Typical South Florida February weather. Sunny, partly sunny, warm temperatures. The day was going along smoothly at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School is located at the north end of the county in Parkland, Florida. It's a large school, almost over 3,000 students attend that school. And it was just a normal day in February. But excitement for the kids and students because it was Valentine's Day. Years ago, there was a song about one moment in time. And one moment in time can really change everything. And on this day, at approximately 2:19 in the afternoon, Nicholas Cruz, and I'm going to only say his name once from here on, and I will refer to him as either the shooter, the active shooter, or the gunman. The shooter gets out of a Uber on Pine Island Road. There's a little path that goes into the school, and the school, it was 2:19. The school day ends at 2:40. So by that time of the day, the school monitors were going around and opening up the gates because students are going to be let out, school buses were coming in, parents were coming up to pick up kids, students who were old enough to drive would be able to drive out, go home. So having attended that school, he knew a little path where the gate was now open that would lead him to what is known as Building 12. It's also called the 1200. You'll hear the 1200 building. Sometimes you might hear the freshman building or Building 12. All the same thing. It's a 3-story building, built or opened at least in 2009. It contains 30 classrooms. Now, if I can get I see it, the monitor will work right. Well, put up the first drawing here. Hopefully everybody can see this diagram that's up. This is a diagram of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. You can see all the different buildings, the campus, and way up in the top, sort of the top of it, more on the right side, is Building 12. And far over on the other side is, well, just to the, what would be to my right is Pine Island Road. And there's a little path that's in and around this area right in here. And that's where the gunman is walking toward the 1200 building. It's 2:19, he gets out. At around 2:20 in the afternoon, he's going to walk into the building. And you will see as the trial progresses, the video, surveillance video, you will see that the students, it's a kind of a normal day. 3 students walk in just before he walks in. And then he enters the building and he turns, makes a hard right and goes into the stairwell. Now, I'm going to stop that story here because there's background information that you all need to know and understand in regards to this case and to regards to this defendant before we continue on as to what happened that horrible, horrible afternoon at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. The defendant, Scot Peterson, was a deputy with the Broward Sheriff's Office for approximately 32 years. Out of those 32 years, he was a SRO, what is known as an SRO. That's a school resource officer. And school resource officers in general are assigned to certain schools, and it is their duty under contracts that are signed between the cities and the school board and a law enforcement agency. In this case, the contract is signed between the school board and BSO, because he was a deputy for BSO, and then he was assigned to Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. And that contractual agreement puts the defendant under a duty to the school. He's there for security purposes. He's the lead security person at that school. And he has special powers that he's allowed to do that other officers can't. He can conduct an administrative search if he wants without probable cause, but only on campus. So he has special powers that are given to him to help keep the school safe, to make sure the students are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And in general, just to know the school itself, to know the buildings, to know the administrators, to know the teachers, to know even some of the students. So that if anything ever goes wrong, he is the person who knows, for the most part, where everything is. He's been in the school, he knows where it is. He has been the SRO at Marjory Stoneman Douglas since 2009. So he was 28 years as an SRO, but he became Marjory Stoneman Douglas's SRO in 2009. So that's 9 years approximately before that fateful day occurred. Now, during that interim, those periods, the defendant has lots of training. He is trained on active shooter scenarios. He is trained how to handle a situation where he is the only person there, the only law enforcement person there, to handle an active shooter. He's also trained that he has another officer with him or a group of officers, how to go in and how to handle an active shooter type situation. For the most part, active shooter situation, you go toward the gunshots. You're trained to go toward those shots, to find that shooter, because every shot could be a death. In the old days, it was, form a perimeter, not after Columbine. It changed. Usually, active shooter scenarios happen very quickly. And you've got to get in and you've got to find the shooter, or do everything you can to find him so that you can stop the killing. Now, there's other things that the defendant learns and the school administrators learn. As a matter of fact, just a month before this awful incident, they had a program for the school administrators to learn, and the teachers, about hardening their classrooms and what to do if all of a sudden you're faced with an active shooter situation. So the teachers and the administrators are learning that they need to harden their classrooms, have safe places in their classrooms, keep the doors closed and locked, cover the windows. This practical advice that would help stop an active shooter. Now, the defendant is also trained. He's trained as an SRO. I mean, he's trained on all the special things that an SRO does for a school. And he's also trained, of course, on his weapon and how to use his weapons in whatever scenario he may face. So he becomes the SRO of Marjory Stoneman Douglas in 2009. 2016, he has training on active shooter. In 2017, he has more SRO training. And finally, we come up in 2018. That training the month before was done at the school for the staff and teachers. And the defendant was there for that also. Now we go back to that day, that afternoon. First thing you need to understand is that there is surveillance throughout the school. There are surveillance cameras inside the 1200 building. There are surveillance cameras outside the 1200 building. There are surveillance cameras all over the school. They don't cover everything. There are certain sections that don't get covered. There's no cameras in the classroom. There's no cameras, obviously, in the restrooms. There's no cameras in the teachers' lounges. And sometimes there's just not a camera in certain areas or captures a certain area. And one of those areas happens to be the very front of the 1200 building, the 12 building. That's where the shooter enters. There's two doors that go right into a main hallway, and there's a third door that goes into the stairwell. The school itself, the 12th building, has two stairwells. There's an east stairwell, and then one on the far end of the building that's the west stairwell. So, again, by looking at the screen, we're talking about the 1200 building, or the building 12. At the time that the shooter enters the 1200 building, gets out of the Uber and goes into the 1200 building, the defendant and a lot of the administrators in the school's security specialists, Kelvin Greenleaf, and the vice principals are all in and around the number 1 building. That's the administration building, which you can see is actually it's south of the 1200 building, because this is north, east, west, and south. And if you don't really like directions or don't like east and west, north and south, unfortunately in this trial you're going to hear a lot of that. And I'll show you why with this second photograph. This shows the interior of Building 12. And it's important because the shooter takes a certain route. He goes from east to west on the first floor, west to east on the second floor, and then on the third floor, east to west. So in looking at that diagram, all of this is on the east side, see, and all of the other side is the west side. So the way it's oriented, it's east and west, but the classrooms themselves are north and south. For example, classrooms on the first floor, 1256 or 1255, face north. Classrooms 1254 or on the third floor, 1254 or 1257 face south. And that's the same for all the floors. The first floor is down at the bottom, and you can see it's 1217 and 1218 are the furthest classrooms to the east, and 1202 is the furthest classroom to the west. And the floors are basically the same. There's bathrooms on each floor, and some of the floors have teachers' lounges or offices. So it's important to have that orientation of the inside of the building, and it's going to be important to have the orientation of the outside of the building. The shooter enters the school with a gun bag and ammunition, quite a bit of it. He immediately goes into that east stairwell. He makes that hard right, because just before him you're going to see 3 students walking in. Ashley Baez, she's going to walk down for the farther end, the west end of the hall, and you're also going to see Martin Duque and Luke Hoyer walking in just before he walks in. Martin and Luke will go down the hallway slightly, and they will stop in front of classroom, you can see on the bottom on the first floor, in front of classroom 1215. And sitting in front of classroom 1215, working on a computer, she had asked special permission, is Gina Montalto. So the 3 of them, Luke, Gina, and Martin, are in front, or they're in that little alcove. You can see there's the 1215 classroom and the 1214 classroom, and they have, the doors are in a little alcove, and that's where they are. Now, the shooter takes out his gun, and just as he's doing that, another student happens to just walk through and into the stairwell by accident. And he quickly leaves. He sees the gun, he sees the shooter, and the shooter says, something bad's about to happen, get out. He gets out. And then The shooter exits that stairwell, the bottom, goes out, takes his weapon, and fires it down the first floor corridor. So he's at the far east end, and he begins firing. This is around 2:21-ish, 2:21:33 seconds that he begins firing. And you're going to be also hearing, not just north, south, east, and west, you're going to be hearing a lot of times, because the timing is important as to where everybody is. So we know at that time, he's on the first floor of that building shooting. Where is everybody else? Most everybody else is over, if you're talking about the defendant or the administrators, they are over near the administration building 1, and the other picture that I had up. There are some campus monitors. They're in and around the campus because, again, they were getting ready to let school out in a few minutes. So they're located at various different locations around the school. Shortly after those first shots are fired, the video from outside the number 1, the administration building, shows security specialist Greenleaf and defendant Peterson meeting outside that building. And they start to walking out. They're not rushing, but they're walking toward a cart. Everyone at the school uses golf carts. They use them to get around the campus. And they're going to get on the golf cart because information has come over the school radio that something is happening in the 1200 building. Something's not right. So they go to get a cart. It turns out they can't get the key for the cart, turn it on. And they turn around, they start walking the other way, and another cart pulls up. And in the cart is school monitor Medina. Medina had been over by the 1200 building. Now he comes over, and at about the same time, the alarm system in the school goes off. Now, this is another thing we have to discuss. The school, the alarm system in the 1200 building, in the 1300 building, was a little newer than the rest of the school's alarm system. It was much louder. There were alarms in every room in the 1200 building, and every classroom had an alarm. Then they make a piercing noise when they go off. In the rest of the school, it would be like a siren alarm, but it would be heard throughout the school. If it goes off in one building, the whole school goes off, and it's controlled from the administration building. So as they're hopping onto the cart, the defendant gets in the seat next to Medina. Medina's driving, he's next to him, and Mr. Greenleaf gets in the back. And they take off. Now Medina is driving them right to the 1200 building. So they're now on their way to the 1200 building. Meanwhile, as that process is happening, the shooter has fired, and then those initial bullets hit and kill Luke Hoyer, Gina Montalto, and Martin Duque. At least they initially certainly injure them, and then he later comes back and shoots them again. And that was the end. When he's done firing those initial shots, he turns to the building across from the 1215 building. You can see 1216 is across the hall. And he fires into 1216 through the door and through the window that's embedded in the door. He fires into that classroom twice. And in that classroom, the shots hit and killed Alex Schaffner, Elena Petty, and Elisa Allen. Now, you're going to notice when you're watching the videos that almost immediately after the shooter begins to fire, this white stuff starts to appear everywhere. It's like dust
it just starts coming down like it was snowing almost. He has, what he brought to school was an AR, Smith & Wesson AR-15. Very powerful gun. Rifle, semi-automatic rifle. It's very powerful. And the percussion from that rifle causes dust. Remember, the building was built in 2009. The ceiling tiles have been up there now for what, nine years or so, because it's 2018. And all the dust that had accumulated up there starts falling down. And then probably maybe some of the construction dust that was left up there. But anyway, it all comes down. And what that does, it messes a little bit with the school surveillance system. It makes it stop and start because it's based on motion. It only records when it sees motion, detects motion. So it stops twice, 2 or 3 times as he's going down the first floor. And so you just see a still photo and a still picture, and then all of a sudden he'll start moving because the dust was too heavy and it was causing trouble with the cameras. It's that same dust that then sets off the alarm. That's the fire alarm that goes off. Now, the fire alarm is very loud, as I told you. It's not on all that long, less than a minute or so, because it's controlled from an administration building. And they can go in and turn it off because it's loud. And the normal practice is to go and turn it off and have people go to see whatever set off the alarm, to go, they check it out, and then they decide whether, they need to call back to the administration to restart it because there is a fire and you've got to evacuate the school because that's the plan. If there's a fire, you evacuate. And then they can call over the school PA system into the classroom, so let them know that's what's happening. So the alarm gets shut off after just being on for a short while. It is on, and then it is off while the shooter's on the first floor. He hasn't left the first floor. It's on and off. And it really doesn't come on for about over a minute after he begins to shoot. He continues down the hallway, and he approaches another classroom, and he shoots into that classroom, which is actually the classroom that was next door to where Martin and Luke and Gina were outside of 1215. He shoots into 1214. And there he kills Nicholas Gouret and Helena Ramsey. He continues down the hallway, and he shoots again further down the hallway into 1213, and he kills Carmen Shintro. It is at that point, when he is down the first floor, he's made it down, as you can see where 1213 is, he's made his way down the floor, first floor. It is about that time that the security cameras pick up that golf cart. You can see in the distance that golf cart, all of a sudden it appears in the screen, it crosses the screen, and then it disappears. Because it's now going to stop on the southeast corner of the 1200 building. I'll put the other map up for just a second here. The cart comes racing between the 7 and 8 building, and it goes to the southeast corner of the 12 building, while the shooter is still on the first floor. He is now down toward the end of that hallway. Now, just prior to that, in the car arriving, a school monitor, Chris Hickson, runs into the 1200 building from the east end. He's running into the building, from the west end. He runs into the building, it's in between 13 and 12, and he runs into the west end of the 12 building. Remember, the shooter, he initially fires down the hallway, and then when Chris Hickson comes in through those doors, those west doors, he fires again, and he hits Chris Hickson, the monitor, and Hickson is hit, and he rolls off to the north side of the hallway. There's like a little indentation because there's either a bathroom or there's a closet there, and he rolls over that way to get out of the line of fire in the hallway. But he's injured. He's still alive, but he is injured. The monitor, Medina, he drops off the defendant, and he drops off Greenleaf, the security specialist, as I said, at the southeast corner of the 1200 building. Just about at the time, the shooter now has made his way all the way down the hallway. And as he gets to the end, he looks and he sees Chris Hickson. And it appears that he fires again into Chris Hickson. And then he turns. I'm going to put the other photograph back up now. He turns, because now he's at the far west end of the first floor. So he is all the way down at the far west end. And those red and black markings that you see, those are just the placement of security cameras in the school, in the 12. So now he's made his way all the way down the first floor. And he has killed Luke, Gina, Mark, Alex, Elisa, Elena, Helena, goes Elena and Helena, Nicholas, Carmen, and Chris Hickson. And I'll check. He turns, he's going to go up the stairwell now. He's going to go up to the second floor. He's going to turn to his left and go into the first floor stairwell at the west end of the building. And as he does that, the timing could not have been worse. As he turns and goes into that stairwell landing on the first floor, the school monitor, another school monitor, Aaron Weiss, is rushing into the building. And Aaron Weiss opens the door to go inside, and the shooter is right there, and he shoots and kills Aaron Weiss. And Aaron Weiss does not make it inside the building. He's shot twice, he's killed, and he falls on the outside patio. The defendant and Greenleaf are at the other end of the building. They are at the far other end of the building, on the outside. They are about as far away from the shooter as they could possibly be at that point. Those shots are heard. The defendant will yell shots fired into his BSO. He has two radios. One is the school radio, one is the BSO dispatch. He will yell shots fired. At the same time, you'll see video of students who were evacuating the 700 building. And now this is where things get a little interesting, but a little complicated in the sense that you had a fire alarm go off, and then it gets shut off. And there was no reporting back of what the fire was, so nothing came over the school, the PA system. So the kids in the 700 building start to evacuate. They're doing what they're supposed to do when there's a fire. So they start coming out. That building faces the 1200 building. And that building does not have an inside. The corridors or the classrooms all face the inside. So this is the 700 building. And those students are coming out because they're following their fire evacuation plan when they hear the shots. And you can tell, they're all kind of just walking out because they think it's a fire, And then or a drill, most likely, and then all of a sudden, they hear something and they just go scattering back to the 700 building. Shooter continues up and down the second floor. Now, the kids in the 700 building were evacuating for a fire break. The students and teachers on the second floor of the 1200 building have heard the gunshots. They had the training the month before about what to do when you have an active shooter, and they have all gone into their classrooms. They've gone into the safest portions of those classrooms, the hardened areas, those areas where if you shoot through the door, you don't open it, but you shoot through it because it should be locked, you wouldn't be able to hit anyone because they would all be in a hardened corner. And when the shooter gets up to the second floor, it's empty. There's nobody in the hallway. Totally empty. And he begins to make his way down the second floor. Now he's going, again, from west to east. He's done the whole first floor, and he's going the other direction on the second floor from west to east. And as he goes down that floor, he shoots into classroom 1231. There's nobody to hit, but he shoots three rounds into that classroom. And then he'll continue further down. That classroom, 31, faces the north side of the corridor. And then he shoots into 1234, which faces the south side of that corridor. Nobody in that room either. Now we have to go back outside. What's happening outside, right? For approximately 27 seconds, you do not see Kelvin Greenleaf or the defendant, Peterson. You don't see them because there's no camera in front of the 1200 building. They are standing where they were dropped off. You do see the cart that brought them there, with Medina driving it, it goes off. You see that go off into the distance to the east. But they are left there. And they stand there for approximately 27 seconds or so. And then they move. And they move, and I know this is getting a little back and forth, but we have to, it's a little hard to tell, but they move from the southeast corner of the 1200 building to right here between the 700 and the 800 building. There's an alcove. That is the alcove that the cart had run through, and it was coming up from building 1 to building 12. So there's an alcove there, and that's where they move. They go from the 1200 building to the alcove. The defendant will never leave that alcove while the shooter is in the building, and actually doesn't leave it until almost 40, give or take, 40 minutes, or a little bit longer, when everything is finished. The whole time he's there is about 48 minutes or so. And that is from when he first arrives, which when the shooter at that point is on the second floor, until it's all over. By 3:11, they were already evacuating kids out of the building. Kelvin Greenleaf is over there with him. He's not a police officer, he's just a security specialist. He doesn't have a weapon. The third floor. You will hear video. You will see a video from the third floor. You will be able to hear what they heard coming from the first floor when the gunshots are being fired down on 1 before the alarm goes off. And everyone is sort of, you'll see, they're all sort of looking around like, what was that? What was that? And somebody says, they give different explanations for what the noise was that they were hearing. Then the alarm goes off. And when the alarm goes off, they decide to start to evacuate because the fire alarm is going off, so they'll evacuate. Now, some kids initially go to the east stairwell, both of the kids go to the west stairwell, and It's not, it's organized, because they just think it's a fire drill, because now that the alarm is on, they're gonna walk out. It turns out that as the kids on the west end of the third floor of that building, they're all trying to go down the stairs, so that would be here. Now, remember, we're talking about the 1200 building, the defendant is over here with Kelvin Greenleaf, and we're talking now about the third floor of the 1200, or the 12 building, and that is this floor here on the top, west end and east end. On the east end, the kids sort of back up a little bit out of this, they're taking their time, they're getting down the stairwell, it's starting to back up. And one of the students, Armand, gets pushed toward the window. And he looks down and he can see Greenleaf, and he can see Scot Peterson, where they were first dropped off at the southeast corner of the 1200 building. And he sees that Deputy Peterson has his gun out, so he knows something's not right. Well, they're there getting ready to evacuate when the shooter now is on the second floor and he shoots into those two classrooms, right? They hear those bullets and you see them all turn around and fly back up to the third floor. And they're all going back to their classrooms. There are students at the very first students in front of the whole crowd who are going down that east stairwell do not turn around. They continue down. They continue down to the first floor. One of them goes and starts to look. They come down that exactly where the shooter had started, right? They come down that stairwell on the east side. One of them goes and looks down the first floor corridors, and then the corridor and other ones follow. And all of a sudden, you will see from the camera on the first floor and then from the stairwell, they have seen the carnage. They have seen what happened on that floor, and they go flying out the doors, the first floor east doors, the same doors shooter came into just a few minutes before. When that happens, right, remember those shots went off on the second floor. The defendant and Greenleaf have now moved to that position over the 700 building, that alcove. And they have a perfect view of the 1200 building, the east side, and its whole south side. Because they can, from this spot, they are able to see, from that spot there, they can see the 1200 building, east end, and the south side, all the way down to the west part of the 13 building. Those 5 students are flying out of the 1200 building on the east side. Nobody stops them. Nobody asks them what's going on. You see Security Specialist Greenleaf, who's he's to the south, which would be if the defendant is here, he's just sort of right behind him. And the camera picks up Greenleaf. That camera picks up Greenleaf. There's another camera that's looking down the side of this building, all the way down here. That picks up Defendant Peterson at points when he's coming in and out of that alcove. He stays in the same spot, but he moves a little bit back and forth, and sometimes you can see him, and sometimes you can barely see him. But Greenleaf is right behind him, and you see Greenleaf like going, to the kids, move, or just gesturing at them. Nobody talks to them. Nobody finds out why are they fleeing out of the building. And there's no cameras on that east end of the building to show them coming out. You see them from the inside running out after they see what happened on the first floor, but you don't get to see what happened when you go outside. But nobody's nothing. They're not talking. And that was a reaction because the rest of the students had heard those shots on the second floor and they'd all run back upstairs. You're also going to hear see a video, because let me back up just a little bit. I have told you there's surveillance video, right? That's from the school, and there's no sound. There's no sound, and it's motion censored. That's what makes it start or stop. There is also body-worn camera video that comes to the police officers, BSO, They have like cameras on their vests to the front, and so they have, it films what they're doing as they're going through their day. Then you'll be seeing body-worn camera. That does have sound. You'll also be seeing cell phone video, which of course, as you all know, has sound and picture. Back on the first floor in classroom 1213, a student is making a recording what's happening. While they're hunkered down in the room, she makes a recording on their cell phone. And the first recording picks up, you hear the gunshots and the fire alarm is going off. The second recording, the fire alarm shuts off. And you'll have an opportunity to listen to it. It's when the defendant is on the first floor, and he has, not the defendant, but the shooter's on the first floor. And he has moved down. In the first video, he's right on the first part of the floor. In the second video, he's made his way to when Aaron Weiss comes in the building. And on that video, you hear bam, bam, bam. And that's Aaron Weiss being killed. And then you hear the shots, the bam, bam, bam from the second floor. Three shots into 1231 and 3 shots into 1234. And now the shooter has finished the second floor. He gets into that stairwell, the east stairwell. He's one flight above where he entered. And he's going to climb up the stairs, and he's going to enter the third floor. The kids in the third floor who were evacuating for that fire drill don't all make it back in their classrooms. There's still people in the hallway. The video that the student in the first floor had, you'll see that was recorded, the second one, captures the sound of what happens when the shooter gets onto the third floor. He opens the door from that stairwell, he's on the east end, he turns again to the west, just like he did in the first floor, and he starts firing, and you can hear it on that cell phone video. Bam, 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 bam. At the exact same time, Deputy Peterson is 3 floors down over at the alcove. So he's just catty corner and below of where the shooter is. The shooter's up here on the third floor, and he's over here. He is on dispatch. He's talking to BSO dispatch, and in the background you hear all those shots. Those shots, as that shooter comes out of the door, the very first classroom is 1256, which that classroom faces north, 1256. This is the east end of the third floor. And teacher Scot Beagle has gotten all his kids back into the classroom, and he's attempting to get the door closed and locked when the shooter comes out of the stairwell. And he shoots and kills Scot Beagle. He doesn't make it back into the classroom, he just collapses right there at the door in the hallway. Right next door to Mr. Beagle's classroom is classroom 1255. Stacy Lapel is the teacher in that classroom. She gets all her kids in, and she manages to get herself in and close the door, but she does get hit. She survives, but she does get hit. Now, he's also been firing down the hallway, just like he did in the first floor. Those bullets are flying down the third floor hallway. Those bullets hit Meadow Pollock. They hit Carol Laughlin. They hit Joaquin Oliver. They hit Peter Wang. They hit Jamie Gutenberg. They injure Anthony Borges. They injure Marion Kavichenko, and they injured, well, I've already told you, Stacy Lapel was already injured. Meadow Pollock and Kara Laughlin end up here. They're on the south side of a locked classroom, I'm sorry, up here, south side of a locked classroom, in the little indentation, the little area where the two doors are, just like on the first floor where Gina and Luke and Martin were, but they're up on 3. They've been hit. You can't see Kara, but you do see Meadow. She's moving. And I'm sorry, and there was one more person hit, injured but not killed, was Kyle Lehman. So it was Kyle Lehman, Anthony Borges, Stacy Lapel, and Miriam Kavichenko. The doors to the bathrooms on 3 and 1 are locked. They were locked because there were vaping problems going on in the school, and so only the doors to the bathrooms on 2 were open so they could control traffic in and out of the bathrooms. Joaquin Oliver and Kyle Lehman and another kid make it into that little alcove that's in front of the bathroom, which is on the north side of the hallway, or the end here, on the 3rd floor. The shooter reloads, and when he reloads, some of the kids and the teacher are able to flee and get down and out the west end stairwell. Jamie Gutenberg was one of them, but she got hit just as she was approaching the exit door to the stairwell, and it hit her in the spine. She makes it outside the door and collapses onto the landing. She's on the west side, the west end stairwell, 3rd floor, and she collapses on the landing. She dies. Peter Wang is also running towards that door, and he gets hit. And he falls down, and then he sort of is sitting up against the far west wall. There's doors on one side, there's doors that go out to the stairwell, the west stairwell, and then there's doors to a teacher's lounge on his other side, and he's leaning up against the wall. Anthony Borges has fallen. He's on the floor. And he can't move. He's in great pain. He survives, but he's in great pain. He can't move. Kyle Lehman has been shot badly in his ankle. And he's in there with Joaquin. Joaquin can't move. Joaquin is sitting also up against the wall. He can't move. And Kyle and the other kid, or the other person who's in there with him, they actually, when the shooting, when he reloads, they take off, and he's able to get out of the building. The shooter reloads, goes down the hallway, and as he passes Kara and Meadow, he fires again, killing both of them. He continues down. He looks to his right, outside of the men's room, because the door is locked. It's Joaquin Oliver. Joaquin puts his hand up as though to shield himself, and the bullet goes through his hand and into his brain and instantly kills him. He then continues down the rest of the hallway, and he fires numerous shots into Peter Wang, killing Peter Wang. You now have 14 kids, 14 students, and 3 staff members, teachers, staff members of the school who have been shot and killed. The shooter gets to the end of the hallway and goes into the teacher's lounge. And he's at 3rd floor, west end. He goes into the teacher's lounge. The defendant, Peterson here, is still in his position in the alcove between the 700 and 800 buildings. shooter goes into the lounge and he fires 5 shots into the hurricane-proof windows. Some of them face south, some of them face west. 5 shots to the south, 5 shots to the west. The bullets do not go anywhere. The windows are hurricane-proof. It breaks and shatters them, but they really don't go, and they don't hit anyone. He's done. 6 minutes, 40 seconds. He's done. He walks out of the teacher's lounge in and around, it would be about 2:27, 30 or 40 seconds. You see him, he walks across, directly across in front of Peter Wang and into the doors that lead down the stairwell. Jamie Guttenberg is still lying on the landing. And by just a few seconds before 2:28 in the afternoon, he exits the west end of the 12th. He goes all the way down the stairs and he goes back into the court. He doesn't go through that door where Aaron Weiss was, the door that leads just into the stairwell. He goes through the door that leads to the first floor, turns sharp left and outside. He then proceeds, he's heading west. And he's heading west and a little bit south. As he's going to go, he's fleeing toward that west side of the school. So he comes out this way. And when he comes out here, Bennett Peterson is still here, and he doesn't see him. And then the shooter runs off, and then eventually about an hour or so later, he's captured. Bennett Peterson remains in this position until approximately 11 minutes after 3. Some approximately 40 minutes after he had gotten to that position from when he left the 1200 building, outside the 1200 building. You will hear from several witnesses. You're going to hear from Kelvin Greenleaf, who says that when he was there with Bennett Peterson by the 1200 building and then in the corridor between 7 and 8, that those shots were coming from the inside of the 1200 building. You're also going to hear from Officer Einlich. He is way over here. It's a little hard to see. There's a baseball diamond. And he, on his part-time, when he's off work, he waters the baseball diamond to get it ready for the nighttime baseball games. When he starts to hear the commotion and the shots, he starts moving toward the 12 building, and he will come all the way over into this general area, and he also says the shots are coming from inside the 1200 building. Just a few more things I want to go over. Elliot Bonner is also a monitor, and he will be the one who also hears the shots are coming from inside the 1200 building, and he orders a code red. And this happens around 2:30, 2:24. It's well into when the shooting was going on. The code red means everybody, there's an active shooter, get into your classrooms, get into your hardened areas. You will see him as he kind of gets closer to the building, and then he pulls away. After that, now I told you the shooter left that building, was out of there by 2:28. At 2:32, Coral Springs Police Department, they enter the west end of the building. And they begin to just search the building, see Hickson, he's still alive, they put him on a cart, he's carried away and shortly thereafter passes away. A few minutes later, it's a mix of Coral Springs and BSO. They will enter both sides. They will enter the east end of the building. And when they do that, when they enter from the east end of that building, Defendant Peterson is still in his position. And he remains in his position as they enter that building. And he is, remember, as I told you, the one man who would know the inside of that building the best. If you, 2 days later, in an interview with Detective Curcio is taking interviews with everybody. He's the lead detective on the Cruz case, the shooter's case. And he's just taking statements from people to find out what they did that day and what was going on so they can gather information. And the last charge that you heard the judge read you, the perjury charge, it comes from that statement, wherein the defendant doesn't, or says that he only saw so many children, and he come out of the building and didn't see any children, and also he heard only a few shots. And none of the perjury charges arise out of that out of that interview. It was a horrific day. And 17 beautiful people were lost. Another 17 were injured. The ones, in this case, the charges all stem from the third floor. They're all from either people who passed away on the third floor or who were injured on the third floor. But overall, it was a unspeakable, horrible